Where did we leave off? So we talked about all that? Solid. So we'll finish this one and another one. And in addition, I would actually like you guys, I'm going to give you back your test that you took for me. I'm going to have you bubble in all the letters. And that's going to have an easier time of grading. I realize it might be a little bit selfish, but that's okay. It'll give your test to you faster, and ultimately that's better for you anyways. Yes, ma'am.
Can you collect, are you going to collect the money and permissions for the form?
I really need to get an envelope for that. I'm going to hold off one more day. I know I keep saying that, but yes, I am. I keep getting distracted by other things. So anyways, I'll just remember it someday. It's okay. Alrighty. Alright, so basically the Manchu were a group of barbarians. Now, that's a funny word when you hear right down to barbarian, because it evokes all kinds of different images. But you guys know what the word barbarian means? It actually refers to the Greeks. The ancient Greeks called anybody who wasn't Greek a barbarian. Because to them, it sounded like their language sounded like them going, bar, 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 bar. So they're barbarians. They won't even speak for Greek. So it just kind of came to mean anyone that was uncultured. Well, that's kind of subjective, isn't it? Because no people on this earth don't have culture. It just is different. And we hold certain things higher because of a certain perspective. Because that culture we have is better, it's superior. Other people's culture is inferior. Great example of that. Why are there swear words? Because
they're held to the highest emotions, therefore.
But here's the thing: is that's not what really like. Because I can say a bad word now and be happy. It's so different. They're so, oh, why did you say that word? No. It's especially funny because words are just a way of communicating an idea. So why is communicating one way polite, but communicating another way is rude? Yeah. I need to update them. I had one day where I couldn't access the network, and so I began stockpiling all these things, and I just need to upload them. It's on my to-do list. But I will. I'll put them on. Actually, I'll do it next period, so that you guys have everything. Okay, I'll answer that question for you, by the way. Generally speaking, think about what swear words are referring to. Things that you don't bring up in polite society, yeah? But even then, there's considered a polite way of saying it, and we all know your meaning. For instance, I've got to go to the bathroom. We all know what happens there. You're not taking it back. You know? But if you say, I'm going to take a crap, somebody's like, oh, okay, that's really rude. Or maybe it's an even naughtier word, you know? So we get the same meaning, so why are the words different? Well, generally it's because the words that we initially associate are between French, or rather, Anglo-Saxon. Because the French word to go number 2 is defecate. Yeah, we probably wouldn't use that because it sounds too formal. But you know what the Anglo-Saxon word is to go number 2? S-H-I-T.
Yeah.
True story, bro. Yeah, that's what they would have said. It means the same thing. There's no caveat. There's no weirdness to that. And this is true for every bad word we have in the English language, except for like one. That it is just the Anglo-Saxon term for it. So basically what it is we are still oppressing Anglo-Saxons by calling their language disgusting and dirty. So just consider this. This is something that's historical. I'm not making this up. It's true. It's too dumb to make up. But it's something that we continue on despite knowing the origins of it. Words change. And we make a word to try to be polite, and then eventually people start using it in everyday parlance, and it starts to take on negative connotations to where we can't use that word anymore. Yeah?
So when people say the S word, so they're really saying poop?
Yeah, same thing. Means no different. It's just a word. Great example of that, by the way, is where you take a word that's meant to be polite but eventually becomes bad as retard. Because you guys know what the word retard means, don't you? Slow. And then we started calling people slow. And that was rude. We say mentally handicapped. Well, that's rude. Mentally challenged. You know, we just keep hunting the ball down, creating new words to eventually become offended by them. Another great word is Negro. People get upset. I know, right? But do you guys know what Negro means? Or rather, Negro? Black. You know what I'm saying? People get upset about these words, and they change the meanings, things like that. But that's the fun thing about language, you know. We change the meaning to try to not offend people, and it comes full circle. Another favorite one of mine is Indian. Oh, I shouldn't call people Indians. Well, okay. How about Native American? Well, that even now is becoming offensive. So some folks say First Nations. You know, we just change. It's words. It's semantics. We get offended by things, but it's kind of silly. Yeah.
Okay, you brought it up. My old teacher, I used the word Native American, and my family's Native American. Like, we go and, like, we do Native American things.
Sure.
And that's what they call it. Like,
Yeah.
that's what they call us. And in the book, we were reading about it. And, like, it was saying in the book, Native American. Like, that's what the Social Studies book said. And then I used the word, and she was like, next time you say that, I'm going to give you just another so rude and all this stuff. And I was just like, what? Like,
Yeah.
it's in the book. I'm just going off what they call it in the book.
Yeah, I know. And the funny thing is, even the whole Indian thing, like, a guy I hang out with is 100% Cherokee. He calls himself an Indian.
Yeah.
And he's not, it's like, whatever, it's dumb. It's semantics. But that's kind of the interesting thing about society in general, is we take words and we give them meaning. That sometimes they don't even have that meaning that is prescribed to them. Like gay is another fantastic word that way. Because gay means happy. Because like if you guys know my old Kentucky home, I presume.
Yeah.
There's a line that about being gay on the floor, and people are like, what? No, it's happy, like playing, you know, never mind. You know. Especially like in And there's all kinds of words like that too. It's like, and words that are like really, oh my God, I can't believe you say it, like faggot's another one. Because that refers to firewood.
What? Firewood?
Yeah, like there's a dude in medieval cities called the faggot monger. Firewood. What? But why are we laughing? Because we've given it a meaning that doesn't mean it. This is a historical thing. And yes, we're recording this and putting it on YouTube. So you guys are gonna go like this, your parents be all like, look what we did today, and like, oh my God. But there's a point to all this. There's a point to all this. Because the Manchu were barbarians. Oh my gosh, they don't speak Chinese. They're gonna be terrible things. But, remember, that it's just like what happened with the Mongols. We shall take over your country. Fantastic. Welcome. We prepared your throne for you. Oh, thank you very much. And here's your taxes for the week. And we've gone ahead, and if you would just sign right here, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and get started with your coronation ceremony. And damn the Chinese. Welcome to your new dynasty. They did this for centuries. And it's a brilliant tactic. Because think about it. Any other time you have an empire invaded, everything's destroyed and burned, and everything is going to be changed to be a reflection of these other barbaric cultures. Now we're going to make it Chinese, and it's just going to be cool. And that's what happened. China is an incredibly diverse place that we don't really think about because they're Chinese. And it's silly because there's as much diversity there as there is in the United States. You know, it's like saying someone's an American. Well, first of all, that's probably the crappiest definition of somebody aside from Asian there is. Because think about it, say American. Well, do you mean South America? Do you mean North America? Are they Canadian? Are they Venezuelan? What are you talking about? North American. Okay, is that Mexico, the United States, or Canada? American. From what region? Are they from Maine? Yeah, you say that like you're some kind of alien. They are. They eat lobster, man. That's messed up. You would. I don't know what that means. But yeah, anyways, we can go into this detail quite a bit. You know, because region really defines a person in a way, as does their background, their family, their ethnicity. All these things make a person, you know. So it's a very diverse subject here. And because China was this cultural heart for East Asia, they had this trend of bringing people in and developing this very rich, intense culture that you don't see in many other places. So that's just one of these kind of examples. Another thing is when the Manchu came in, you know, they were again one of these barbaric northern guys, you know, Hell's Angels like guys with crazy like weapons and and making them streamlined Chinese. I mean, one of the major emperors, Kangxi, ends up doing all these kind of things that we would consider, hey, this is like really kind of an efficient empire builder, because they had this Confucian system. The problem, though, is there's a lot of waste when he's emperor. There's a lot of money going into things in the government that really we don't need. It's not even really about like spending money on things I disagree with, because we can argue that till we're blue in the face. You know, we can say like, well, I don't think the government should spend money on this, whatever. We can argue that. Some people say, well, I think we should spend our money on that. But that's not really an easy way of saving money in the government, because if I'm trying to save money and I'm trying to eliminate projects, what am I going to eliminate? Am I going to eliminate welfare? Am I going to eliminate education or transportation or the military? I mean, the government kind of does important things. Now, we can argue saying what's more important than the other, but that's not going to get us very far. Instead, what Kangxi does is brilliant, because he doesn't get rid of anything except for money that is wasted. He streamlines That means less money is going places than it has to. Does that kind of make sense? It's efficiency. Instead of spending money paying all these people to do all these different jobs, if I can only have to do one person doing one job that has the same effect, why not do that? And that's what he does. So by streamlining it, he is able to reduce taxes but without eliminating government service. That's awesome. In addition, he expands the empire beyond what had ever been done before. So Kangxi is able to create this monumental sort of golden age of China into the, we can kind of consider the late classical age. By the way, this is a Manchu. Ooh, scary. This dude, he made business. Seriously though. This is the uniform of some of the scariest people in East Asia. The reason behind this is to understand geography. These people are from the central part of Asia, central north, like Mongolia. And this area is basically grasslands, right? So the way they have to survive is by herding animals. This means limited resources, and whenever you have limited resources, you have war. Because for my family and my tribe to survive, I've got to take more from your tribe and your family. So we're constantly fighting each other, right? And they develop a system of warfare that uses horses to launch arrows from bows on top of a horse. Have you guys ever tried shooting a bow before, shooting archery? It's not that easy, but especially doing it on a horse at full gallop, and they can also shoot behind them. They are mad skilled. I mean, this guy is a horse warrior. You can actually see his sword is curved. The reason for a curved sword is whenever you are attacking someone from atop a horse, this thing's running, right? So you're swiping at somebody, and if that blade gets stuck, it's going to rip it out of your hand because it's a lever. Basic physics. You have the straight thing. Someone hang on to that for just a second. It's like, I got it. I'm running. And you see how it's putting more and more pressure on my wrist, so eventually it goes, it's out of my hand. Now I have no weapon. That's bad. Please hold that for a while. The curved blade, on the other hand, it's a bit like a deli slicer. It goes in, and as you ride forward, that curve keeps the pressure on whatever it is you just stuck it into and slices it through. In fact, if you look at cavalry sabers up through the Civil War, even to World War I, they were curved after this style of sword. So these guys were scary dudes because they were constantly fighting. They were out in the they were tough, And the thing is, let's talk diet for a second. They had a lot of protein for building strong muscles, things like that, as opposed to a primary veggie-based diet. So these dudes were beasts as well. Like, there's one story, not of a Manchu specifically, but of a Mongol. I heard where they took this guy, they folded him in half and broke his spine. It's like, what? This just kind of like crushed. It's like, how is that possible? But it happened. So these dudes were like intensely strong. I'm not saying they were like the Incredible Hulk, but they were pretty tough dudes. So someone like this coming in, and as ruthless as these types of people were, is like, no thank you. So they use that to their advantage and create this empire, However, the problem is isolationism. Now, this is a policy. This is not necessarily something that is unique to China, but it's a philosophy, if you will. We have two different ideas here. We have globalization, or global presence, and isolationism. Basically, how involved are we going to be in the world? And isolationism is we want to remain away from, sequestered from these other foreign forces and things like that. So in the case of the Chinese, you might recall there was the Arab, whose name just escaped me. I think it's Zhang He. I could be wrong. Someone can correct me on that. But he put together this giant armada to go explore. And what he did was go out and find all these other places around China and basically convince the Chinese of their superiority. So, isolationism came around to protect themselves from outside influences, to remain more Chinese. This is also a reaction to barbarians like the Manchu. It was used by both Ming and the Qing dynasties. But the problem with it is the West, while initially inferior, is going to emerge as superior due to the advances of the Industrial Revolution. That gives them an advantage, so when the Chinese and the Europeans meet again, that they are able to overthrow this idea of isolationism and force them into really kind of unequal, unfair trade practices. And thus begins a whole new age of imperialism. Scary stuff. That, everyone, is that for China. Next, we move on to Japan. And a whole other set of problems. You see, one of the things I find very interesting is most of our understanding of Japan comes from their television, whether it be cartoon shows. Yes, I know the proper term is anime or manga, as the case may be. But the other things are like game shows and things like that. And it gives us a very different view of what Japan is actually like. It's funny hearing stories of this guy I know, through reenacting actually, who moved to Japan for I think it was like 7 years and taught there. His wife is actually Japanese. They have one of the cutest relationships in the world, let me just tell you, because his Japanese is just kind of okay from what he tells me. Her English is just kind of okay, but they make it work. And that's adorable. Like there's sometimes when she gets so frustrated because she's trying to express something but she doesn't know the English good. And like there's this one time like I forget what we were talking about. I think it was my dog actually. And she couldn't get the words. She get mad. She puts her hands. Kiki-chan, just use the words you know. And it's like so adorable. One, the term chan. It basically means cute, is a close approximation. And so it was a pet name. It was like, honey or something like that. The other thing is, like, that's the kind of stuff I say to my 3-year-old. Use the words you know, because, she'll get mad, she can't explain something. It's human nature, I just thought that was kind of cool. But he tells me all the time about like how they have people go to Japan, they have this like belief it's going to be this crazy neighborhood. It's not that at all. Like, ramen noodles, everything like Japanese food that we're curious of. It's like McDonald's. It's like White Castle, Japan. It's like not good. People get it, but it's like you're kind of grossed out about it too at the same time. But anyways, that's it's just kind of interesting, I think. But another thing we're going to get into is mythology. Now, we're not getting too far in depth. It's more like the misunderstanding of things, like misunderstanding of words and stuff like that. For instance, the term samurai and ninja. Those are two popular things in the United States. Yeah.
Quiz, like no feeling test now.
Quiz and yes.
Wait, section 3?
Yes.
Doesn't have doubles.
You're on your own. You good? So the term samurai literally means they who serve, or to serve. Japan was a feudal society, in fact, very similar to the Middle Ages in Europe. They had their own elite class of warriors. We call them knights, they call them samurai. However, there are some pretty distinct differences in how they operated. For instance, the knights of medieval Europe were heavy cavalry. They used their horses to literally crash through enemy formations. The samurai were like the Mongols. They were archers. They used a type of bow and arrow on horseback, exacting accuracy to devastate the enemy formations. However, they also had other weapons that were specifically tailored to specific jobs. They're probably most famous for the katana, which was a cavalry sword. It was curved. It was two-hander, or hand and a half, technically. But it also came in pairs or even threes with a dagger and a slightly smaller sword called a wakizashi. These were used in pairs to fight in a fighting style that varied from place to place. Kendo is the most modern, but it's not really the only, it's not even actually really terribly accurate. It's really a modern sport, sort of like sport fencing is in the Olympics. But the samurai were incredibly well trained to fight these wars over land, and various warlords called daimyo would actually support these samurai, much like medieval lords supported their knights. And they were used much the same. We're actually going to watch a video on the historic samurai tomorrow after we take a quiz. It kind of goes into some of this stuff a little bit more detail. Ninja is actually a common misnomer that refers to essentially a Japanese special force training. Generally think of ninja, it's a sort of like mystical warrior that uses magic and can do all kinds of just insane supernatural abilities, which has no basis in history really at all, other than misinformation that was purposely used in warfare. There's also this belief I've noticed where people say that ninja were trained against samurai. It's not true at all. Many samurai were also ninja. It was just a type of warfare. In this case, though, it was warfare that was not so overt, put it that way. It was spying, espionage, and things like that. And so a lot of the tools they utilized were useful in that style of warfare, which is not fighting a direct engagement. It's to get away. Like the martial arts most often associated with jiu-jitsu, no kata, is actually aimed at disabling an attacker and escaping, especially fighting as a lightly armored trooper against heavy armored troopers like the samurai. So that's where the miscommunication sometimes comes in. But specifically, we're looking at the period right before what's called the Warring States period. So that's 1467 to 1568. Rival warlords were competing for land and power, and especially in an attempt to unify Japan under their own banner. Now, Japan did have an emperor, but this emperor was a fairly weak figure by this point and didn't have enough power to deal with the local daimyo. Eventually, he himself loses all temporal power, but retains a position because of the fact that the emperor was also the head of the national religion, which is Shinto. So one of these guys is Oda Nobunaga. He has the distinction for being the first of the daimyo to use firearms, which were got from the Portuguese when they came to trade with the Japanese during the Age of Exploration. His failure to unify Japan was caused by the betrayal of one of his generals. And when he failed, he was forced to engage in a particularly grisly practice called seppuku, or sometimes harakiri, which is a more kind of vulgar term for the same thing, which means belly cutting. You see, the story goes that there was a samurai warrior who was fighting in these wars, who was basically caught on an island. His army was destroyed, and the forces were closing in to capture him. So in one last act of defiance, he fired from his yumi, his bow, one last arrow which sunk a ship. Now this is supposedly true, so, kind of a beastly shot if it is. But either way, it didn't really mean anything. And so he wanted to avoid the dishonor of being captured. However, he didn't want to be seen as a coward. So simply killing himself wasn't going to be enough. So what he did was kill himself in a particularly painful way to show that he himself was not a coward. So what he did was take a dagger and disembowel himself. He cut his stomach open in 3 different places and bled out slowly and painfully. Now, there's also some symbolism to this as well, because in Eastern mythology, the belly is kind of the center of one's person. Sort of like in Western society, we see the heart as the center of someone. Like, for instance, if someone's really generous, we'd say that they have a big heart. Or if somebody is a coward, we might say they have a yellow heart. Or yellow belly is sometimes also used. Or if someone is merciless, they might have a black heart. Or a frozen heart, or something like that. Great example of that, you guys know Fat Buddha? You see Chubby Buddha, right? Buddha wasn't chubby at all. You know anything about Siddhartha Gautama, he's not a fat guy. But, again, the mythology is if you're generous, which he was known for, you have a big belly. So he's known as chubby. Well, to show that his belly wasn't cowardly, it wasn't yellow, he cut it out. So this became a fairly ritualized form of suicide, where if your daimyo or your lord ordered you to do so, you would have to commit suicide. And you would do so with the help of a second who would stand behind you armed with a sword, so that whenever you finished cutting your belly, they would chop your head off so you didn't have to suffer in the pain for very long. They would be there to save you any further dishonor in case you were to show pain or anything else while you were doing this. You had to remain completely emotionless. Now, this wasn't something that was handed down willy-nilly. This is one of the things that in Western society, when they show this in movies, things like that, it's way blown out of proportion. It did not happen that often. But it did happen occasionally for great failure. And to understand that, go back to what samurai means, those who serve. That is, their life belongs to their lord. This is, if they fight in a battle, they either win or they die trying. It is a complete dishonorable act to come back alive to save your skin. The Spartans had a similar concept. Their expression was, come back with your shield or on it. Because you wouldn't lose your shield in combat. It was your lifeline. The only way you would come home without your shield is if you threw it down so that you could run faster. And whenever someone died, their comrades would often put their shields together and use it as a way of supporting them, like a funeral bier. So that's where the other part of that expression comes from. So this is not an unfamiliar concept. So the samurai philosophy is we're already dead, we are the dead who are walking, was meant to basically keep them from being afraid of death. And to some extent it did work. However, the samurai were also expected to follow a code of conduct. It was Bushido, which had its ties in Zen Buddhism. The idea that honor in one's actions reflected not only on themselves, but also their family and their descendants. So right acting was expected at all times, and this was a way of atoning for mistakes, although again, not nearly used as often as portrayed. In fact, way more samurai died in duels than died due to suicide, because dueling for one's own sake was kind of an expected thing. In fact, one dude named Musashi became so good at it, he never lost. He wrote probably the quintessential book on Japanese martial arts in the period called the Book of Five Rings. And one of his main strategies was actually not with a sword at all, but psychological warfare. Like, he would regularly challenge people to duels and show up like 3 hours late. Because they'd be like so mad and upset that he had been, so late, so disrespectful, that they would fight sloppily or poorly. He also didn't follow expectations. Like, there was this one guy he fought who was particularly good in close combat, with really not very much training. So he showed up with a giant oar, like a boat sword, and he just basically beat the guy to a pulp with it because he had the range, and the guy could never get close enough to actually use his techniques. So that is a thing that did happen. Toyotomi Hideyoshi almost unified Japan and also responsible for invading Korea to try to get a foothold. One of the things that we often hear about Japanese sword making, is that the katana is the best sword ever. It's the strongest, the best steel, things like that. And anyone who's actually a blacksmith and knows anything about swords, that's simply not true. In fact, Japanese iron is really crappy. But what's amazing is their ability to make quality swords out of really terrible materials. Like, the katana does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's no better or worse than any other sword. But what it does do, or what's amazing about it, is it's made from inferior iron, and the techniques that it takes to make that, make it something usable, is a skill of a lot of mastery. So they were going to other places to get materials, not just steel, but things like coal. This shows a picture of a samurai using a gun. And one thing about firearms, guys, they're not generally used by the knights and the elite things. They have their own weapons. The idea behind a firearm is it's really, really easy to teach. Like, if I had a week, I could drill you guys into a competent musket player. I have the equipment, you guys can use muskets and you'd be able to do it, no problem. Think about it for a second. A bunch of high school girls can be made into an effective fighting force. Seriously. The Art of War down there by Sun Tzu, he did that. Not necessarily at high school, but he wanted to prove that his techniques were effective, and so he basically said, get me any group of people all trained to be effective soldiers. And so this guy's like, fine, I'm going to get this bunch of girls. And got specifically this group of basically concubines under the emperor, and make these into soldiers. And so what happened was, he got them out there on the field, and it's like, right, you're going to learn to be soldiers. This one girl's kind of laughing, like, right, she's playing with her weapon, things like that. He goes, cuts her head off. Any other questions? They became hardcore. And kind of embarrassed, the other guy was like, hey, you can't do it. It's like, yeah, you can. So, yeah, it's like both freakish, scary, but also like, whoa, you know? So what's the important thing about guns? They replace the knights and the samurai, things like that, because knights and samurai are expensive. The whole economy has to roll around them. I can very cheaply equip a group of just commoners, give them guns, point them in the right direction, and with the proper training, they will out-battle any of these elite folks. Because it doesn't matter how armored you are, I can shoot a bullet through that. Doesn't matter how fast your horse is, the bullet's faster. And so this replaces this type of fighting and really sees the death knell for the samurai. Now, eventually, a new emperor, well, that's not really a good word, a new leader for Japan takes control, and he doesn't get rid of the emperor. He allows him to continue on because, again, being the head of the Shinto tradition, the Shinto religion, you can't just get rid of him, but he can remove him from power. So instead of taking the title of emperor, which would be sacrilegious, he takes the title shogun, which basically is general, and establishes a new capital in Edo and creates what's known as the Tokugawa shogunate, because it was established by Ieyasu Tokugawa. Now, another thing he did to keep the daimyo from continuing this war was to force them to live in the capital. By making the nobles live in the capital, he can keep an eye on them. But another thing is, he understood, they've got to go back to their lands a few times a year to make certain that they're being run efficiently. But he didn't let them take their families with them. Why? He wouldn't let them take their families with them back home. Well, yeah. Partially, we don't want them to run off and go to something else, but why else do we want to keep their families next to us? Okay.
I guess I'm just saying this. If they do something, then they can hurt their family.
The hostages. Exactly. It's hostage taking. It'd be a shame for something to happen to your family while you're gone. Implied threat, don't rebel or else. And it worked. Now, the society was based on Confucianism as well, which you'll remember was a Chinese philosophy. And in the society, the merchants were seen as really kind of the scum of the earth, whereas the farmers were seen in high respect. That didn't mean, though, the farmers had a lot of power. Far from it. the nobles and the merchants still have a significant amount of power, but they don't have the recognition, if that makes any sense. They can't take official positions of power. So this was kind of an interesting little juxtaposition going on. I'll let you finish that up, and then we're going to move on to the next slide. So apparently my daughter was playing on the floor and looks at my wife and says, "Mommy, sit on the floor." And she's like, "No, I can't sit on the floor right now." So she goes, "Oh, come on, the floor is nice. Give it a try." What? Oh, goodness. 3-year-old. She's 3. The other's 3 months, almost. Yeah, 3 months. So, I don't think the 3-month-old was talking. That'd be freaky. Actually, I did hear the story about this guy who was a security officer, and the security company he worked for worked on the cheap, so they had really kind of chintzy walkie-talkies. And so he was driving through this neighborhood, and it would occasionally pick up baby monitors. And so he was like driving on, picked up this one, like there's baby crying, and you hear like this clanking of plates. And I was like, "I'll be there in just a minute, sweetie. Just gotta wait for a minute." And he gets in the microphone and goes, "Baby now." And like his ears like cracking a bit. I will tell you, I've never had anyone talk through it, but when we used to have the baby monitor hooked up, it was like you hear weird stuff in the middle of the night. It's not a baby monitor, you know. It's not.
Wait, so the person that was driving did this?
Yeah. You imagine this poor lady, like, "You never know, baby now." There's no day I won't be soon. Yeah.
Wait, so like that really like hack is your radio?
It's not hacking, it's just the way a radio works.
I'm just not big.
Yeah, a radio just broadcasts everything. You know, that's why they used to not allow, actually they still don't, like phones on airplanes and things like that, because it would bleed over. So they don't want you to do that. Yeah. It's messed up, isn't it? I think now they have like baby monitors that use Wi-Fi, but I mean, my brother actually had one that was a camera. I was like, "Dude, you're lazy." It's like I just want to be able to check out. It's like, walk in the freaking room. It's down the hall. It's not like you're in China or something. Like, oh, you know, that'd be creepy anyways. It's like, I see you. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we had noticed my grandma and my dad used to go on the Mexico. And she's just 95.
Oh.
And she saw like things that we didn't see, like people. So like when we did that, she thought that like her old dead brother was talking to her.
Oh no. Oh, I didn't tell the Newfoundland. Dang. I was where someone was going to tell me geography about Canadians, and then we forgot. It was funny. Because you know, like they make fun of people in Kentucky, in the United States? Like, they like, "Oh, if you wear shoes," things like that. Right, well, the version of that in Canada is Newfoundland. Like, they make fun of Newfoundlanders all the time. Like, there's a joke this guy told me from Toronto, that there was a Newfie, is what they call him, and he was out to, he would learn how to ice fish. So he went and borrowed equipment, he goes out and he starts drilling, and he makes a hole and he drops down his fishing pole, and he hears this giant booming voice that says, "Newfie, there's no fish." And he's like, "God, is that you?" No response. So he's like, "Okay, well, I'll go to another spot. Maybe there's fish here." He drills a hole, starts putting this thing in again. "Newfie, there's no fish." "God, you're talking to me. I'll move again." So he builds another hole into this, like, Newfie, this is the arena manager. Stop fishing. Hockey rink, you know, so. It's a fact. It was dumb. From Newfoundland. It's free. Don't believe me. Seriously. Moving on. So two forms of drama that originate during the Tokugawa shogunate. This was a period that was sort of like the golden age of the arts. And both of these are performance arts, but are very different, yet also kind of similar. We'll get the differences here. No, NOH, is a sort of morality play system. It is a masked role where one acts out through singing and through minimalistic action. These characters are represented by masks, sort of like ancient Greek theater. Because the idea is whenever you were representing another character, you physically put on this new face and became them. So there's this whole tradition of that. In fact, the international symbols for drama, you know, the two masks, come from Greek masked theater. But this is kind of similar, also kind of different, because it was based off of Buddhist philosophy, essentially. Now, kabuki is more like the low, crass entertainment style. It's very loud and vibrant, whereas the music in No is kind of almost like a church chant or hymn. In kabuki, it's like crashing cymbals and flutes and stringed instruments. It's all this stuff, and it's going on. It's cool and you know. And it's actually painted face rolls, which is a term for whenever you're putting on your character, your costume, you paint the face as well. And they would use different colored paints to represent different character attributes. For instance, various colors meant different things, and that's true in our society as well. I mean, think about it. When it talks to costuming and things like that, every villain ever wears what color? And every good guy wears green. I guess Robin Hood does. That's true. He's not a hero though, is he? He's what we call an anti-hero, a bad guy that does good things. He's a vigilante.
What color?
He goes and beats dudes up and hangs them up. He's not a good guy.
What color is
What?
What color is Joker?
But that's not justice, that's revenge.
What color is the guy?
White. Traditionally. Now here's the thing is,
Who?
in Japan, Luke Skywalker is a great example of that. Although there's some color switching that goes on in Return of the Jedi where he wears black. And it's the question of he's slipping to the dark side. What?
Look at Iron Man and Hulk. Hulk wears green.
Oh. That's true. Although I don't think he's exactly a great example of an in-control individual. But anyways, these are just generalizations, folks. In traditional theater, though, in Japan, though, those colors are reversed. White is a symbol of someone who's untrustworthy. Black is a color of honor. And what's interesting is you'll have characters that have both black and white to show that they're a mixed type person. Like maybe not someone who's fantastic and good, but maybe has some bad traits, or maybe someone who's not necessarily like Batman would be black and white. They're not the best person, but they have good intentions. So, you know, it's kind of one of these interesting things. That actually reminded me of GSP. Whenever I was teaching there was a guy who did a program called The Most Powerful, which was a debate where each student was assigned a superhero and had to debate and prove that their superhero was the strongest. And like what was silly is like, you know, you think it's like, because it was all kinds of superheroes, like you think like Superman, folks like they have really no weakness would be number one, but I think it was like Aquaman or something like that. Because like you just had a really good argument for it. And I was like, huh. Yeah, I don't think that's really a thing. It was a movie.
I love that movie. I love that movie.
Okay, do me a favor then. whatever you do, when you become like it, get past the 1920 mark, never watch it again. You will hate it then. Because whatever you like as a kid, you look past all the plot points, errors, things like that. If you go back and watch it again, you're like, oh my god, this is so dumb. Why did I watch it? Like one that I always thought was hilarious from the 80s growing up was The Never-Ending Story.
It's so scary.
Go watch it again, you're like, oh my god, this is stupid. They have the Swamp of Sadness. You're gonna go to he goes to a swamp and dies of being sad? It turns you emo? But here's that's just I mean that's the thing.
Still scares me.
It's silly.
Why
Yeah.
is it Clifford Clifford thing?
Clifford the Big Red Duck. He's a communist.
I just want
Think about it.
Dragon Tales?
All right, let's finish this slide, guys, because we're running low on time. You guys aren't going to be able to do everything I want to do anyway, so we're not distracted by stupid stories. Hey, so we talked about we talked about all this already. Oh, we didn't talk about Christians. So what happens is the Christian missionaries begin spreading the faith in Japan. In particular, Francis Xavier, who ends up spreading it. Basically, he was a Jesuit who was sent to go spread the faith all throughout Southeast Asia. In fact, he was eventually canonized. And you guys know St. Xavier High School? St. X? Now let's take it easy. We'll finish it up very briefly tomorrow. Yeah, we're doing a quiz. Guys, basically 90% of this is going to be on sections 1 and 2, with maybe a couple questions from here. Maybe not quite 90, maybe like 85.